Hit everybody with it. What's your idea for the Jets at quarterback?
Well, I think, we talked about my thought on the free agent market right now and bringing a guy in that hasn't played any football through 2 weeks of the NFL season. And so ultimately, what's your other option? Exploring a trade. Who across the NFL in, situation their teams would be interesting. And to me, having a history with the organization, having played with him, they're now off to an 0-2 start. It's an organization that kind of pushed all their chips in a few years back and said, got to an NFC championship game, we're going to go sign a high-dollar free agent quarterback in Kirk Cousins, and we're going to try to get over the hump to win a Super Bowl. And ultimately, 5 years in, now 2 games into the 6th year, it hasn't worked. And it's a team that, in my opinion, when you watch them on tape, doesn't have the talent around Kirk that was there. I'm not saying just on offense. I'm saying as a team and as a whole that was there during that window to win a championship. So that is a team that, in my opinion, they're 0-2. Where are they going to go? Is it time to finally completely blow it up? They hired a new head coach, a new GM, kind of redid the entire building. If that's the case, if you're the New York Jets, you pick up the phone, you call the Minnesota Vikings, I think it's worth the conversation, because if you look at Kirk is a guy who's on the last year of his contract. Kirk is a guy who added some voided years to his contract, so his cap number is not as high as it once was. And if you're saying that, ultimately we have Aaron Rodgers and he'll for sure be back next year, maybe he'll be ready to go in the playoffs. Kirk certainly is a guy, as you look across the NFL from a starting quarterback standpoint, that would give you a great chance to go win enough games to get in the playoffs and play football in January.
Woo! Now, that's a hell of an idea. I have so many questions when you bring it up, especially with your history with this player, your history with the organization. My first questions, I guess, go to the Vikings because, yes, they're 0-2. I think you're very much playing the role of someone who is eyes wide open and realistic with the Vikings right now. It's not that an 0-2 start means that you're done. Historically, you will miss the playoffs 90% of the time when you start 0-2. And I think there are many of us, self-included, if you want to look at last year and say this team was just 13-4, but man, everything went their way for that. A negative point differential. They won all the close games. We saw what happened to them when they got to the playoffs. So I guess my first question would be, does that feel too much right now like the Vikings giving up on this season?
Well, I think you have to ask the question, what does success look like in Minnesota? What are their expectations? I mentioned that Kirk Cousins was brought to Minnesota to get them over the hump to win a Super Bowl, coming off of a NFC championship game loss. The quarterback was supposed to be the missing piece that put a super talented roster over the hump to win a championship. It's an organization that has never won a championship. So, again, we're at this spot from an organizational standpoint where you win the division last year. Yes, you won 11 one-score games, but you win the division, you're in the playoffs, and you have another early exit from the playoffs. So, if they do turn things around this year and, you look at their schedule, you got the 0-2 Chargers coming to Minneapolis next week. Then you go on the road and play the Carolina Panthers, first overall pick, rookie quarterback. You have a really good shot at getting back to 2-2. So I don't think the Vikings can look at this season and say, oh, it's over. Like, let's give up. We'll trade our quarterback. But it's where are you going? What are you doing? What's the plan? again, it's a quarterback where he's in the last year of his contract. You haven't extended him. So why haven't you extended him? Does he want more money, or you don't want to keep him? So to me, I think there's just a lot to uncover here. And again, if I'm the Jets, it's a phone call that I have to make to at least find out. And if you're the Vikings, I think it's a phone call that you have to take. You have to listen. What are they willing to give you for a guy who ultimately he might not be in your plans? And, why not get something for him if you haven't extended him to this point? And who knows, maybe, a draft class with now it looks like 3 really good quarterbacks at the top.
Yep.
Might be a good year to grab a quarterback. And, now you're able to build a roster that doesn't have such a high dollar quarterback taking so much cap space away. And, personally, if I'm a GM and I take over a team, that's how I would want to build one.
I tell you what, it is such a fascinating conversation, and I think a lot of NFL teams end up in this conversation, and I think each one has to be taken kind of individually. I don't think there's a blanket answer here, but what to do when the contract is up for your quarterback who is good. He's good, and I'd put Kirk in this category and maybe at the top of this category, but he's good, but you just don't necessarily feel like he's the one who can get you over the top, especially not at that dollar figure and what that does to the rest of your roster. You look at teams around the league who are faced with this, and there's plenty of decisions that go in both directions. 49ers moved on from Jimmy Garoppolo because they thought not at that dollar figure, not quite good enough even though he's good. Raiders did the same thing with Derek Carr. Not quite good enough even though he's good. I would put the likes of Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones now, recently. These guys are in that bucket too, and they got their deals, but their teams have not gotten over the top. Certainly Jones is just getting started now with his second contract in the NFL. But it's an intricate question, case by case, and so I wonder if what you're saying is the tea leaves are suggesting that Minnesota feels that way. Like, Kirk, we love you. You've done some really good things, but at that dollar figure, it's just not quite good enough.
Well, and I think that would be a great answer to the question is why he's playing in the last year of his contract. If you feel like it's good enough, why have you not extended that deal? Kirk has made it public that he would love to stay in Minnesota, and he said, he was very politically correct about, you're always playing for your job. When asked early in the season, it felt like he had to prove it this year playing in his contract year. And ultimately, it's either you've proved it, you've been there for 5 years. Either you've proved it and they know you're the guy moving forward, or they've already made up their mind. And to me, that's why I feel like this is a conversation that they should explore. You mentioned the San Francisco 49ers moving on from their high-dollar quarterback who ultimately took them to the Super Bowl. They were a Super Bowl team with him, and, a blown second-half lead away from winning a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, and they made the decision that they were going to move on for a younger, what they thought was talented quarterback that they traded a lot of draft picks at number 3. Certainly it worked out with Brock Purdy, but, that's kind of that philosophy. Can you get close enough to the top in the draft where we're going to take a guy that we believe on a rookie contract we can build around and have more success with? The 49ers are number 1 in the NFL with $45 million in cap space. And they're, in my opinion, have one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. They have guys everywhere, and yet they're number 1 right now in cap space, and it's all because they don't have that high-dollar quarterback.
And in fact, they now have, and I haven't looked at this to be sure, but I'm confident that they have the lowest priced starting quarterback in the entire NFL. I think Brock Purdy's making $870,000 this year, which is hysterical, quite frankly.
I was gonna say it is, and it allows you to have the highest paid or one of the highest paid left tackles in football, one of the highest paid tight ends in football, one of the highest paid running backs in football, one of the highest paid linebackers in football. You can put so much talent on a roster when your quarterback is on a rookie deal. So, it's interesting. I think it's a conversation that both sides should have. I think certainly the Jets would be like, this is our best opportunity, bar none. For the Vikings, it's something, hey, maybe going into this year, we certainly did not think this is where things were going to go, but we need to listen. Do I think it's realistic? Absolutely not. I think that's just us putting our GM hats on and thinking, what is the ideal scenario? What is the most interesting scenario? I think something that would be more likely, and personally, if I'm the Jets and we're trying to figure out what's the solution, not named Zach Wilson, you look at some veteran backup quarterbacks in the NFL that you could trade for who, I mentioned before, these free agent guys are coming in off the street. They haven't thrown a ball in a live rep all year. You have guys like Jacoby Brissett, Andy Dalton, Teddy Bridgewater, Blaine Gabbert, veteran quarterbacks who can come in, and if you're saying all you got to do is hold the baton, you're the placeholder for the next 4 months, get us 9 wins, get us 10 wins with a super talented roster and a really good defense, I like my chances with those guys more than Zach Wilson.